So we have our service in place. Now we're going to go ahead and try and call it. So we're going to go back here in our doWork method. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and create our intent. All right, so declare an intent. Just call it service intent. So new intent. Now there are a lot of different ways to create an intent. When you're creating an intent based on a component name, it just takes two parameters. The first parameter is the context. The second one is the component class. Right? So as we talked about, the activity class inherits from context, so we can just pass this as the first parameter. And we want the class for the service component. Right? Our service is called on-demand worker. So we'll say on-demand worker .class. And so now we have an intent based upon that component. So now all I have to do is call start service. I'm going to pass in my intent, service intent. And that sets it up for us. Now, we want to go and give the user a little bit of feedback, at least some of the things went on. And in general, when we're doing things in the background, like with the service and so forth, we don't do a lot of updating of the user interface. A good way we deal with things like this are with toast, right? There's little floating windows that pop up, right? So let's just create a toast and just say that work has started. All right, so we'll go ahead and create a toast. We'll just call the variable toast as well. So we'll say toast dot make text. And it wants a context, which is this. And then it wants the message. We'll just say work has started. And the other thing it wants to do is a length, right? And so we don't give length in terms of absolute times. We give it either a short or a long, right? So we'll just say toast dot. Okay, so basically what that says is float the text up that says work has started and leave it up for what's considered a long time as opposed to a short time because there are any options. So we can just say toast dot show. Right, so that way when we kick off the work, it'll go ahead and start running. That work has started will float on the screen for a few seconds. Do a quick build here, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Okay, all went well there. So let's add a couple of breakpoints here so we can see actually what happens. Go back here to my on-demand worker, and we'll set a breakpoint there. All right, let's go ahead and launch it. All right, so we have this in our emulator. All right, so let's go ahead and say menu, doWork. All right, so we're in our doWork method. And so we go through there, and of course this should work as we expect. Right, just kind of step through it. Creates the intent, right, as you expect. So let me just go ahead and let that run. You see now it's stopped back here in our on-demand worker. Right, so we step through there, of course, and that's going to go ahead and do its thing. Right, so we see there that it did what we wanted. It actually launched the work, and it went off and started doing it. Right, so that works. So let's look at a couple of things here. One thing is let's go and take these breakpoints out, and let's see what the user saw when we did that. So we get these breakpoints out of here. Switch back to the emulator. And just say menu, doWork. You see the user saw the work has started. Now let's take a look at what was in Logcat and get a sense of what was going on there. Right, now remember that in each case I was called this process and thread ID, which would actually show the label and what process and what thread it was running on. Let's go back here to our Android Logcat. So you notice here is that when I do my activity doWork, it was in process ID 674, thread ID was 674. And of course, that may seem strange if you're from Windows background. If I'm in Linux, right, the process ID is whatever the thread ID of the main thread is, which is why these guys match. Right? But if you notice here, then we look at our on-handle intent. Of course, the process ID matches because they're still in the same process. But you notice that he's running back on a different thread, right? So we're still using threads to run things in the background. The key thing is that thread's encapsulated in a service. One of the things that's important to note as well, and we'll talk more about this in an upcoming module, by declaring that as a service did not automatically create that other thread for us. The intent service class did that for us. We'll see as we start to create services ourselves later on and take more direct control of them, it becomes our responsibility to do that. And that's one of the benefits of the intent service class is it does take care of launching that thread for us. All right, so we've seen that all those things work for us. Right, that we were able to launch it, it ran in the background for us, we were able to show things to the user, our UI remained responsive, all good things. The one thing that comes up though is that just kind of calling out to a service and not being able to pass any information to it, well, that's kind of limiting, right? We want to be able to pass arguments. And something we might want to do in a case of our service is that, well, maybe rather than back here using a hard-coded file name, you notice that I have a hard-coded file name, which when I say that, maybe we'd like to see that come in here as an argument. Right now, the way we pass any kind of our own arguments with intents is with extras, right? So if I go back here to my activity, what I'm going to do with the intent, I'm going to say service intent. I'm going to call put extra. I'm going to use the one that accepts strings. So I'm going to give it a string name, which is file name, right? So it's kind of the parameter name in effect, and whatever name I want to give it. Right, and so what I should say, whatever value I want to give it, whatever value I want to give it for the file name. Right, so we'll just say this is a alternate file.out. So we'll pass that in there. So that now attaches that as an extra, right? It's effectively a parameter to it. Right? So what I want to do back here then is that where I actually receive the intent, because remember the intent gets passed into the on-handle intent here, is we're just going to look for that extra inside there. So what we'll do, so we'll have our own string field here. And what we'll do is we'll go to the intent, and we're going to call get string extra, and whatever name we were using, which was file name. Now, if that file name extra was passed, we'll get the value. If the caller did not pass that file name, we'll get a null here. So what we can do then say is that, well, if file name equals null, then we'll set it to the file name we've been using all along. And so now we'll use the file names that's passed if one is passed. If one is not passed, we'll just use the same one we always did. Right, so again, I'll put a breakpoint here. We'll go ahead and put a breakpoint in the front as well. Go ahead and run it. All right, so say menu, do work. Okay, so of course we're now in our do work in our activity. Right, we're setting that to be alternate file.out. All right, so we'll go ahead and let that run. And so now in the background here, on the background thread, we come along, and we're going to go ahead and ask for that extra. Right, so initially, of course, the file name would be null. Right, but if we step across here, let's see now file name is our alternate file.out. So it allows us to pass that as a parameter. And intents accept all kinds of different parameter types. They accept integers, as well as even some more sophisticated types. Right? So that is a very useful way for us to pass parameters into our services.